The car had caught on fire. I'm not gonna put the ECU back in. Oh, no power steering. All right, let's floor it. Hi. The reason why we've all gathered here today is, well, let me just show you. Please ignore the steering wheel. If this is not your style, it's not mine either. This is how the car came. We have 0 volts on the battery. We have a bunch of bulbs. We have traction control light. We have parking brake light. Well, that's because this is engaged. Well, we have a flashing parking brake light, ABS light, airbag light. Basically, we have a lot of lights. If you're new to the channel, I bought this thing basically about a week or two ago with a lot of issues. The most major one of them at the moment is the fact that the car had caught on fire in the past under the previous owner because he did not put the turbo and downpipe heat shields back on the car after he was doing some sort of a service on them. Where's my block of wood? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of snow. Anyway, okay, so if you're familiar with these engines and most cars in general, they will have heat shields around the exhaust, especially the exhaust right next to the engine, because that stuff gets really hot and there's a decent amount of stuff in the engine bay that doesn't like to get too hot, such as the wire harness. So this guy right here, as you can see, is missing a lot of the insulation, and it also has a lot of electrical tape on it. And that is because, yes, this guy caught on fire due to the lack of those heat shields. The previous owner was rebuilding these turbos or something along those lines, or changing the turbos, and he never put those heat shields on. Bad idea. If you have one of these, make sure you have your heat shields on, or at the very least, make sure that your wire harness is properly secured to the firewall and doesn't drop down to the downpipes. Long story short, the wire harness caught on fire. It is sort of taped up, but it has a lot of melted parts on it. And there's also multiple plugs that are unplugged. For example, the oil level sensor is unplugged. The oil pressure sensor, I think, is unplugged as well. The alternator plug is unplugged. That's why we're reading 0 volt on the cluster. That's how the car came. I'm not really trying to plug those connections in and find out what happens. There's a very solid chance of all kinds of shorts going on. And what that might do is blow the ECU, blow a bunch of fuses, and potentially start another fire. So we're really gonna try and avoid that. And the good news is that I finally found a brand new, well, new to me, used wire harness for this engine. I found it on one of the Facebook groups. I just made a post asking if anybody has any available, and somebody did. I actually got this for a very good price. So the engine that's in this Allroad is the same as in the B5S4, which is, you know, it's becoming a rare car, and it's also a car that's over 20 years old, and the wire harnesses, especially in like really dry, hot climates, they do not survive too well. Long story short is these become pretty rare to find, and people can charge upwards of $500 for these. I ended up finding this for $150. I got super lucky and bought it without much hesitation. So we're gonna try and replace this whole thing today. Don't know if that's possible, but we're going to find out. I'm sure there's a lot of different plugs that are very hard to reach, and maybe even impossible without major disassembly in here, but we're gonna do our best. I would really like to do the minimum to get this thing drivable. Now, you may have noticed that I have quite a bit of projects in the shop currently. This is sort of my daily / business vehicle. If you're new here, as of very recently, I'm a licensed car dealer, and this would be my hauler for car trailer for whatever new projects I pick up at auctions, because these guys can actually tow a decent amount of weight, and I really like these models. I love the air suspension, I love the comfort, heated steering wheel, heated seats, giant brakes. I think these are fantastic until they need an engine replacement. That's a different story. If you are curious about this thing, please check out my other videos. I've been doing pretty good with putting out very consistent content. I try to post every Friday at noon. So if you would like to learn more and see what happens with all these projects, please subscribe. And maybe hit the like button to help me with the algorithm and help other fine people like yourself find my channel. Currently, I'm dealing a B5A4 1.8, and that is my daily simply because I have nothing else. The Touareg is broken. B5S4, not in such a great shape, and so I ended up buying this B5A4 for like $2,500. And I'm a little sick of it. It's kind of fun. It's a 5-speed manual, and that is pretty enjoyable. It's got great winter tires on it, and in general it's been pretty enjoyable to drive around in. The only issue is that it's just so little power, floor it, and nothing happens. This would be a little more fun a daily. I would probably raise it, put different wheels on it, and figure all the other issues out on this car. But the thing is that I haven't even read the codes on this car because of the messed up wire harness. I already know it's gonna throw a ton of codes at me, and I won't know which ones of them are caused by the wiring issue or with the components of the car. So we're gonna start with this side of the wire harness, which is more or less easy. So as you can see, we can sort of kind of match this up with the existing harness. We have our O2 sensor connectors over here, and then we have our ECM coil control modules. I suppose this might be the only thing going down there. For some reason this has a thicker insulation on it, but I hope it's the same amount of wires. That's another issue we might be dealing with, is that there might be differences between these wire harnesses. I really hope that there won't be, but it is entirely possible. Remove the airbox, give myself some more room. Luckily, a lot of this stuff is already missing, clamps and stuff like that, because this stuff actually did catch on fire along with the harness, and the previous owner did replace them. Something to note about that is that he replaced the MAF sensor with the second variation of them, aftermarket one, AIP Electronics. Not really familiar with these, but the problem with this MAF is that it does not match up with the connections for it on the wire harness. It was not meant for this car. With that said, the tune will probably have to be different to accommodate this MAF sensor. I don't imagine it would run too well. We may have had some sort of a mice for some time. Oh yeah. Has an extra wire in this, which is for the alternator plug. But bottom line is that my new harness does not have that plug, which is very, very unfortunate. And overall, I would say things are looking pretty good on this motor. I'm not seeing any major oil leaks. Both of these are for APB engines, and somehow there's still differences. I guess there's the early models, there's the late models. Problem with this project is that there's also aftermarket stuff, or just stuff that the previous owners have added over the 20 years of the age of this car, and I have no idea what this is. I did decide that it would be in my best interest to remove the fuel rail. Maybe I don't have to remove it completely. I think just lifting it off the injectors is enough for me to get all this stuff out of here. So I do know that this guy was definitely replaced. This is not the original ECU, because the original one got fried when the car caught on fire and the previous owner had replaced it. Now let's see how well this matches up with the new harness, and I'm by no means too educated on what I need to look out for. Alright, so I am finding a few different pin locations and stuff that don't match up with the rest of the car. Extra pins that are not in the old harness. Considering the fact that this car has been swapped in the past, I am worried that there may be some things that I don't really know that were done to this harness. Okay, even though I'm not entirely positive whether or not this harness will work without modifications, whatever modifications I do have to do will most likely be on this side, so I'm just going to keep this unplugged. I'm not going to put the ECU back in. We're just going to stick this in here and start working on plugging in everything else on this end, because I need to do that while it's still fresh in this head. So at this point I've plugged in everything, almost everything that there is to plug in, apart from the things that were different and that weren't working out, such as this, where this blue wire was going to the alternator and the red and black was plugged into the this guy. So then I went ahead to plug this all in and see if the car would start and run. When I went to plug this into the ECU, it wasn't going in. I was having a really hard time figuring out why, and then I realized that this little plastic knob that sticks out in the inside does not match with this hole for it. So this is how I imagine Audi keeps people from plugging in wrong harnesses into wrong ECUs. Bottom line is that this harness is not going to work with this ECU. Yeah, sure, I could modify that plastic piece, just break that off or whatever and not have this issue, but chances are that if Audi made that extra step of making sure this doesn't happen, there's a good reason for that. This harness is not going to work in this car. So that was 150 bucks wasted. Maybe one day I'll have something to use this harness on, and I think what I'm going to resort to is fixing the original harness that came with the car that's burned. It will take me a long time to try and figure out which harness I need and to find that exact harness, and I would probably end up spending a lot of money because I doubt that I'll be able to come across a deal as good as this one, and I'll end up spending a lot of money. So we're just going to try and fix this one. Subscribe. And this is what the final look of the harness is, or just the wiring. I'm still going to wrap this, obviously. Basically, I just used a lot of these and a lot of heat shrink to cover them up. There's definitely a few that I sort of forgot about because you have to slide in the heat shrink before you put this on. Just forgot to do that. I don't think it's too bad. I'm very confident in all of the connections being made. Very silly of me, by the way. Definitely something I should have checked first is the plug-in into the ECU, but oh well, what can you do? Now we're just gonna have to wrap this up. I bought high temperature electrical tape just for this purpose, and we're gonna use that to wrap this all up and do our best at doing it neatly. Alright, so here's the finished product. As you can see, I did some wrapping of the harness to try and prevent this from happening again. This is actually exhaust wrap that came with the car, and I don't really know for sure if it works well at containing the temperatures away from it. It's technically an exhaust wrap is designed to keep the temperatures inside the exhaust. Here we're trying to keep the temperatures out. Regardless, I think this is gonna be at least somewhat of an improvement, maybe not as effective as appropriate wiring harness sleeves, but I think this is gonna help us out. I have a bunch of high temp electrical tape all around. Everywhere where the plastic started cracking or started looking to be worn, I covered it up with electrical tape. And then I made sure that all the wiring, all the insulation, everything looked good, and whatever didn't, I repaired it. I am pretty confident in this harness, even though, yes, it underwent a lot of work and there's a lot of splicing. I think I did a really good job. I did my best to do it properly, do it with quality and care. And hopefully we don't ever have any issues with this harness again. So now, due to my own stupidity, I have to undo everything that I have done up to this point and take out the new harness that I already installed. Okay, that took very little time, honestly. Compared to the first time I was taking this out, this was much quicker. Yeah, without further ado, let's carry on and put the new one in. Old new one. New old one. And before I do put the new harness in, I have one of these heat shields that the original owner deleted. Unfortunately, I can't find the other side. I don't know if I have one, but we're just gonna do one side with the original heat shield. Two bolts that I just installed. That third one doesn't seem to have a hole for it. And as for the passenger side, I don't know if this is enough for my liking, which is where having a parts car comes into play. This is a parts car that was a motor donor for my Touareg. And there goes our EGT sensor. So now I'm just gonna estimate where I want that EGT sensor to be on this heat shield, and I'm thinking right here should be a good enough spot. It's not great, but it's gonna get the job done. We definitely had to enlarge the hole so that I can actually screw in the EGT sensor. It will offer some protection. In worst case, I can always take it off later if for any reason this turns out to be a bad idea. Somewhere in this pile of boxes, I have a box of brand new air filters. These are for the Touareg, and these are for the Allroad, and the other one is for the B5A4 that I recently acquired. Cabin air filter. For some reason this car came with it missing. So because the MAF sensor that came on this car didn't seem to be of a reputable brand, I decided not to use that. Instead I'm using this, which I found in my spare part. And actually I think for now, because I'm unsure of which MAF sensor this ECU is tuned for, we're going to unplug this, considering the fact that the old harness had the other plug on it for the old style sensor. So I think this is the smartest idea, having the MAF sensor unplugged. It's not really going to keep us from starting. However, it's definitely going to affect the performance. It's not going to be ideal, but that'll get taken care of once we tune this thing, and that should be pretty soon. Okay, so now that the battery is connected, I think I'm going to go in and cycle the ignition so that we can check for fuel leaks. And I don't smell any fuel, so that's a very good sign. So now we're going to read the codes. Should do it. As it turns out, this thing has a European market hatch, so this is meant for European number plates. The good news is that the heat works. It's getting pretty nice and warm in here. Something to mention is that something I've never had happen to me before is that the car stalled. Dear Lord. I think the power steering is not working, or this steering wheel is just not optimal for this. The car stalled on me when I cleared the engine codes. Never had that happen to me before. She's definitely not perfect, but she's running. And I don't hear any crazy noises or anything like that. She seems to be doing okay. I have a flashing parking brake light, I have an ABS light, I have an airbag light, and I have a traction control light. Seating position just doesn't work for me. Yeah, we really got to figure this seat situation out. Something definitely just broke. The turbo spool sounds fantastic. So I am noticing some funny stuff with under load. She's definitely not running as good as she could have been. But again, MAF sensor's unplugged. I can't forget about that. And I am kind of scared to plug it in because I think there could be some issues that would happen if I were to do that without recoding the ECU, assuming that it's meant for the old style Bosch sensor and not the Hitachi one. Oh, no power steering. Let's floor it. Sorry about that. Should have seen that coming. Yeah, there's definitely some hesitation. With this new steering wheel on, I am a little more satisfied with this interior. As it turns out, the previous owner had ripped the clock spring out, so I'm gonna have to try and address that. I don't have this gold giant flashing thing in my eyes. But we're currently flashing this thing. Brad from German Elite Tuning is currently controlling my laptop and uploading a stage 2 tune on this thing. We are going to be coding it for the Hitachi MAF. We're going to be adding stage 2 with very mild pops and bangs, hopefully. That's what I requested anyway. And he's also going to be recoding my ECU for the manual transmission, because currently I'm getting a code for no communication with the transmission control module, and we have to get rid of that.